What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. So, I thought about it and I wanted to do something kind of fun and interesting to kick off this new season. Starts tomorrow, actually, probably today if you're already living in England. But for me, it starts tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's always fun to kick off a new season, see what twists and turns is going to take. Just through anything, through tournaments, through the league, through injuries, through suspensions, all of it is just so much fun to get into, and the Premier League is the most fun out of all of the leagues to watch because there's so much good competition instead of, oh, Bayern's going to win it, or, oh, it's going to be Barca, Real, or Atletico. In this league, anything can happen. You never know what's going to happen. Leicester won it 2 years ago, for crying out loud. Anything can happen. So I thought about it, and I just really wanted to sort of get on here, and obviously, as a Chelsea fan, my opinion probably won't mean as much to, say, a Man U fan or an Arsenal fan, but I thought I'd just get on here and talk about my thoughts, my predictions coming into this new season, and just sort of based on, I guess, the summer transfer window so far, and based on what I've seen from some of the preseason games, I just wanted to sort of throw out some of my predictions and what I expect to see. Now, just a caveat, a lot of this is going to be extremely wrong. I think anybody trying to predict the league at this point is just moronic because there's no possible way you can get it right. So this is more just for fun, just for me to sort of talk about some of the teams and talk about what happened during the transfer window and just sort of get my opinions out there. Um, so this is very subject to change. I have no clue how right I'm going to be, if I'm going to be right at all, but let's talk about it. So first off, obviously I'm going to put Chelsea at the top. Part of it is hope, but another part of it is realistically, none of the teams have bought this transfer window, have improved their team to be as good as we were last season. However, we have dropped off a bit too. So that does create a lot more, I guess, of a race than there was last season. Because last season we pretty much ran away with it. There was hardly a challenge, and even then it was like, oh, Tottenham are now only 4 points behind them. So it never really got close enough to consider it a true race. It was always like a hope that, oh, maybe Chelsea will drop points this week and maybe it will create a race. Um, but most people will look at last season and say we didn't run away with it. We had the best offense, we had the best defense. I mean, we really just took the league by storm and said this is our league. We're taking it back to London. So based on that last season, looking at our team this season, a lot of it's pretty much stayed the same. Anywhere we've lost somebody, we've pretty much replaced him with somebody else. Zuma, we got Rudiger, Begovic, we got Caballero, Matic, we got Bakayoko. The one area, though, that I think will probably the struggle the most this season will be up top. I'm not sure Murata is going to just step in and fill Costa's shoes. Even if Batshuayi manages to be up there for the first part of the season, and even if he does well, I just don't think he can do what Costa did for us last season. So I think we will struggle probably in a couple games. We may tie a few more games than we did last season, where he managed to pop up and get us a goal. But I still think we will top it off this season. Overall, I think if any changes need to be made, I think Conte is shown that he's smart enough to make some good decisions. The board hopefully will just help him make the right decisions. Obviously he's already expressed some frustration with there are some players he wanted to get that we didn't get. He didn't want to let Matic go, but they did. Just it's one of those things where there is some friction there, and there's a lot of people talking it up like he's unhappy. But I think overall he's going to stay because of what he did last year, and I think he wants to continue to grow our team and make us even better. So I look at all the teams, no matter who they bought. I think we do have probably the best manager for what we have right now. He's able to get the best out of our players. He transformed the system into something that works for our players. So I do say it's going to be a narrow edge, but I do think we edge it just barely. Second place, I've gone with Man U, and this is a team that obviously a lot of Chelsea fans are very frustrated with. Picking off manager, picking off a lot of players. Like Matic, like Mata, like Lukaku. That just players that a lot of fans wanted to see succeed at Chelsea, and now they're not there, and now they're at Man U. So obviously there is a lot of bitterness there, but I think looking at their team, they have improved quite a bit from last year. I mean, Lukaku probably will get them about as many goals as Zlatan got them. I think he is a little bit more physical of a striker, but I don't know if he's as much of a goal scorer as Zlatan is. But I think just through his physical ability alone, he'll be able to get a few goals where they need them. I think Matic coming into the midfield will strengthen them a little bit and allow Pogba to probably be a bit more free than he has been the past season when we saw him. So I think they will improve, but I still think they lack something defensively that will hurt them throughout the season. You know, Lindelof is the only defender they picked up, and I just don't see it. I've seen a couple preseason games. He looks so sloppy defensively. He looks just not good enough to be in our league. On top of that, you look at their fullbacks, and they've still only got Valencia, Young, and then Darmian, and that's pretty much it. Shaw is, I don't think he's half the player that he was whenever he first went to Man U. So I just don't see them being able to hold on to their defense long enough to top us this season. And same thing goes for number 3, Man City. Obviously, they have actually bought some defenders this year, more than Man U. But the problem is, they're Pep's defenders. They're defenders that can play with their feet. Here's the problem. Go buy defenders that can defend and go buy a keeper that can keep the ball out of the net. But instead, he goes and buys Bravo, and I'm sure Ederson's going to be the same way. Just a keeper that, oh yeah, he's great with his feet, but so what? You need a keeper in there that can save the ball. You know, not a keeper that's going to, oh crap, there goes... I mean, Caballero took over the spot at the end of the season because of how bad Bravo was. That should tell you something. So honestly, I put them in third because I think their attack force is strong enough to where they'll probably just be able to win some games by just constantly scoring, even if the other team is as well. But I think there will be a few games where people are going to expect them to just, easy win, and then the little team, whether it's a Burnley, whether it's a, maybe Brighton or Huddersfield coming up, I feel like there are going to be a couple games like that where they go in expecting to win, but then the little team battles it out and they make them work. They're scrappy, they're battling, and it's going to affect them because I don't think Pep's system works for teams like that. I don't think he can manage under teams or against teams like that. And I think it's going to cause them to struggle this season. I hope they do end up lower than third because I'd love for him to be exposed for just how flawed his system is. Because last season, just all the time talking about, I want them to play my way. And it's like, your way doesn't work in the Premier League. It works for Barcelona because they're the best team in that league. It works for Bayern because there are no other teams. Dortmund's okay, but there are no other teams as good as Bayern in the German league. And then you come to Man City, that's not even the best team here, and you're saying that your system is going to work. I'm glad they struggled last season. Honestly, I wish they hadn't ended up in one of the top 4 spots because it would have been great. But they are a team that I think has enough attacking power that even whenever his system is not working, I think Aguero or De Bruyne or even Jesus, if he manages to get some more time, I think they're going to pop up with a goal that'll help save them a game from time to time. So those are my thoughts there on the Manchester clubs, second and third. Fourth and fifth is another one that I think could go either way. I put Liverpool and Arsenal there. It really does depend on Arsenal this season. First of all, will Wenger be there by the end of the season? I think last season was very, very close. I think if they hadn't beat us in the FA Cup final, so hopefully Wenger paid the ref nice and paid him handsomely for all that. But I think if he hadn't won that, I think he probably would have been gone. Like, he's been on death's door for a long time now. I think if he's still there at the end of the season, I think they do end up in fifth, maybe sixth, depending on some of the other teams around them. And I think if they decide to go for the Europa League, I think that league is so much more demanding than the Champions League. It'll also cause them to struggle. So I think if Wenger's still there, if they challenge for the Europa League, I think they drop. I think they end up 6th or 7th. Most likely, Lacazette will do well enough to sort of keep them in and around the Champions League spots for a little while. But I do expect them to be probably the second team out of the top 6 from last season to sort of drop out of the title race. I think there are going to be 2, maybe 3 that will drop out. Obviously, a lot of people are calling for Chelsea or the Manchester clubs. Those are the 3 favorites for the most part. And so I think of the other three, I think they're all going to drop out of the title race at some point. I think Arsenal will be the second one. But Liverpool, I think, will be the one that will hold on for a little while. I'm looking at their team. I'm looking at their buys this summer. It's mainly attacking. They brought in Salah and they brought in Solanke, both of which couldn't handle it at Chelsea. So it kind of does fit into their system because they just love to go, 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 with a lot of speed. It will probably work for them in some games, but I think there will be some other games where teams sit back on them where they just can't do it, because they're not going to have the ability to counterattack on them. I think in those games, the other team will either pick one late or just manage to hold on to a draw, and it will be enough to sort of knock them down the table a little bit. So I look at their buys and I'm thinking, you still haven't bought any defenders. You're still not going to be good enough. So I do think those two will manage to be somewhere in that 4th and 5th spot unless Arsenal just really screw something up and end up even lower than that. I think they'll be somewhere around there battling for that 4th spot. 6th, I've gone for a little bit of a surprise. I'm going to go with Everton here. And Everton have had probably the most successful transfer window. Maybe close second to West Ham. Those two I think have probably had the best transfer windows out of all the Premier League teams this season, or this summer. Everton, though, was a team that was already sort of challenging in and around the Europa League, trying to possibly push up to be part of the top 7 instead of just the top 6. But ultimately, last season they ended still quite a bit of ways from the top 6, by quality, by points. I think losing Lukaku will hurt them a little bit. I think he fits perfectly into their system, and I think that's why he did so well at Everton and why he didn't do well at Chelsea and may struggle at Man U possibly, I'm not sure. But I think the main reason that I'm putting them 6th is not just because they picked up a lot of good buys, but also I think Tottenham's going to struggle. I think they'll be the first one out of the top 6 last season to drop out of the title race. I think they haven't bought anybody. They've lost Kyle Walker and somebody else whose name I don't remember. But they lost somebody else aside from Walker. They haven't bought anybody, and they're going to be in a new home this season. That alone would already have caused them to struggle. You're playing in an entirely new stadium. You look at West Ham last season, they struggled in the new stadium. They moved from their Upton Park, they moved to the Olympic Stadium. They really struggled because of that. Tottenham now have to go play at Wembley for home games. They're going to struggle at first. I think they'll pick up the pace near the end of the season. They'll probably do a bit better. But starting off especially, I just expect them to sort of hit this rut at the beginning of the season where they're either drawing or just not able to pick up some easy points at home. That will really cause them to sort of be bottom of the table and a little bit scared at the beginning. But I do think they have the quality to still pull off top half of the table, easily finish 7th spot. But that's why I went Everton for 6th, and I think it will probably be a good year for them. And 8th, another sort of surprise team that I think, or I hope, because they're kind of the team that I'm going to be pulling for this year to sort of be the surprise team, and that is Bournemouth. They're a team that if you've heard about their backstory, if you've heard the story of them coming into the league, it's quite an inspirational story. Well, aside from that, I think if you look at their buys this summer, I think if you look at how they did last year, I really compare the two. First of all, they were doing great when they had Ake in their team. Before we brought him back on loan, he was doing really well for them. Once we took him out of their defense, they really started to struggle a little bit. They started, giving up a lot of points, and that sort of, they still ended up 9th, which is great for them. But they were sort of in that easy 7th, 8th, 9th position. And all of a sudden they started dropping points that dropped them back towards like the mid-table, in and around that whole bottom half of the table that was in the relegation battle for so long. So I think with Ake coming back into their team, gives them a more solid back line. Begovic is a keeper that I still think can be good if he gets more playing time. You pick up Jermaine Defoe, who is still a really good striker in the Premier League. I think they have a solid team. You kept Josh King on your team, who I thought was a really good player last year for him. And you kept they've kept pretty much everybody from last year, and that's a solid core group. I expect them to do well this season, and I do think they'll be pushing. I don't think they'll be quite close enough to Tottenham to really scare them about dropping into 8th, but I do think they'll be high enough to say, okay, we've got no problem with relegation this year. we're just easily going to be mid-table, no scares at all. Another team that I think, like I said, they had a really, really good transfer window is West Ham. You look at a lot of their buys. I mean, they've got Zabaleta from Man City. They went and got Joe Hart. People have different opinions on him. I think he's okay. I don't think he's that great. They went and got Chicharito, who's still a pretty good striker. They got Arnautovic from Stoke, who's a really good buy for the Premier League. I mean, that's a solid team. They were already okay last season. They had some good moments. They had some good spells. They finally managed to get their new stadium to be their own. And so they started picking up the pace near the end of last season. And I think based on those buys this summer, I think it's enough to really just sort of propel them and just be like, we're good. We're easily safe. They may even challenge for Europa at some point. I do think they'll fall just short just because they still don't have quite enough quality to compete for those Europa League spots. But I do think they'll be sitting comfortably mid-table. No scare of relegation for them either. And then the final team that I think will not really have any sort of scare of relegation will be West Brom. They're always a team that just sort of comfortably do well based on their transfers, kind of similar. I didn't really see any great transfers. I didn't see any loss of players that's going to cause them to struggle. So, yeah, I say they comfortably sit mid-table yet again. Another boring season for them. I couldn't imagine being a West Brom fan because could you imagine just every single year it's like, oh yeah, go mid-table. I mean, last year they had a good solid chance of pushing for Europa League. I remember there was a point where they were like 6 points behind Arsenal in 6th place. I'm like, holy crap, they have a chance to push for Europa League. This is incredible. And they lost like the next 3 games because they were safe. They didn't care anymore. I'm like, wow, that sucks. So yeah, but they'll have another comfortable season, probably no scare of relegation, and that's about it for the teams that really don't have to worry about relegation at all. After this, though, 12th place, these are teams that probably will be more comfortable near the end of the season, but I think at the beginning, maybe sort of scared. They may start off hit and miss, couple wins, couple losses. So I think it just sort of depends on how they start the season. Will depend on where they end up in this bottom half of the table. But I think looking at 12th place, I'm going to go with Leicester. They got a couple good players and managed to hold on to most of their quality players. They've kept hold of Mahrez. They've kept hold of, I think they still have hold of Gray as well. Vardy is still a striker who can pop up whenever you need him. So I think they'll be okay. I think just at the beginning they may struggle to get going, but I think after they get a few wins under the belt, get some confidence, I think they'll just do pretty well. Get back to mid-table. Palace, I'm putting it 13th. They're another team that I think have gotten some, not great buys. They've only bought 3, and 2 of those are on loan. One's Loftus-Cheek, and the other one's Fosu-Mensah from Man U. Both pretty good players, but based on what I saw in their out category, I didn't see any players I'm like, oh, they really needed to hold on to him. So I think they've managed to hold on to a lot of their players that were doing well last season. So I think they'll still do okay this season. It just won't be, I think, as exciting as most Palace fans will want it to be. 14th, I think Newcastle's going to come back with a bang. I think they managed to sort of push into that comfortable region fairly early on. They may lose a few games later on that drops them back into the sort of, oh no, are we going to be battling relegation again? But I think they do okay this season to the point where 14th is a good finish. It's not comfortably safe, but it's also not like, okay, we were right on the edge of getting relegated again. I think Rafa has done pretty well managing to bounce this team right back into the Premier League, and some of the buys that they got last season and this season are pretty much players that were good at some Premier League clubs, but not really starters. And so they managed to sort of snipe a couple of them. A couple from Bournemouth, a couple from us, a couple from Hull, a couple from Palace. Just all around these teams, they just managed to pick off a couple players that are just like, those are still quality players, and they've done well. So I imagine that they'll do well for themselves. It's just I don't know if they have enough quality to really push themselves up into mid-table. Swansea, a team that I do kind of feel for just because, Paul Clement, Claude Makelele both are at this club now. I do want them to do well, but looking at their buys this summer, I just didn't see anybody that I'm like, yes, that's somebody you needed to go get. Tammy Abraham was the only player I actually knew on the transfer in list. So I don't know. I hope they do well, but based on what I saw last season, I don't see enough quality. I put them fairly high actually for what I think. I'm thinking they're probably going to be more in like the 17, 18 range, battling relegation again. So I hope I'm wrong, but they 15th is actually pretty high. I'm sort of overrating them right now. Watford's a club that actually has done pretty well this transfer window. They've gone and gotten a few quality players. They picked off Chalobah from us for such a small amount of money. I'm still pissed about it. They just got Andre Gray from Burnley, who is a pretty good buy. So I think they'll do pretty well. If anything, I think they'll probably end up 15th over Swansea. Just, like I said, I kind of rated Swansea a little bit higher than they probably should be. But Watford, they should do okay for most of the season. I think, though, once they maybe get a little bit too comfortable, I think if they start to get a few wins early on, I think it'll start to go into, we've got this easy mode, and then all of a sudden a few losses here and there, and now they're back into the relegation battle again. But they'll probably do okay for themselves. It just won't be as comfortable by the end of the season as I think they will at the start of the season. Burnley, have had kind of a hit and miss transfer window. They picked up a few good players, but then they've also lost a couple key players. They've lost Michael Keane. They've lost Andre Gray. They did manage to get rid of Joey Barton. It doesn't help him or hurt him. Just I love making fun of Joey Barton, so I thought I'd just throw that out there because it's pretty funny. But they'll probably be struggling again this season. I see them as a very battling team. I see them battling for a lot of points against the top clubs. But I never see them really doing much against the lower clubs. They're that team that, they drew Man City, and they beat Man City, and they drew Man U, and they drew Chelsea. But then they lose to, all the bottom half of the table. And so it doesn't even matter that they do well against the top teams. So I expect another tough season for them. They may manage to just barely edge it out. But honestly, a lot of this has to do with the fact that I have no clue about Brighton or Huddersfield. I know Brighton's a pretty good team. I know they did well in the Championship last season, but it's been a while since they've been in the Premier League. So are they going to come right back in and do well? I don't know. I know both teams have made a lot of purchases this summer. Huddersfield's another club. Honestly, I don't know if they've ever been to the Premier League. I assume they have because nobody's talking about them like when Bournemouth showed up. It's their first trip to the Premier League. Nobody's talking about them like that. So I assume this is not their first time here, but honestly, they're a club that has just been such a, look, they're League One in FIFA. I'm just going to play with them because, just a random League One team. So the fact that they're in the Premier League now, good for them, but I just don't know anything about them. I don't know how they're going to do. I don't know if they're going to handle themselves well or not. I'm sure they're going to come in with a lot of spirit. I do love both of these teams just because I love whenever teams come in that have not been in the Premier League in such a long time. It's always that bit of excitement, like you don't know what to expect. And so, honestly, my entire table could just completely change based on those two teams. If both of them do well, all of a sudden two other teams drop into the bottom three. If one of them does well, all of a sudden they're mid-table, and another team that I thought was going to be comfortably mid-table is now struggling, in the relegation battle. So, I don't know. I just love whenever new teams come in, but it does make predicting it quite hard because you don't really know what to expect from them. But I put, just for prediction's sake, I put Brighton in 18th and Huddersfield in 20th. 19th, you'll notice there's one team I haven't talked about at all. I'm going to go with Stoke just because I think they've lost a few players that will hurt them this season. I think losing Walters isn't the worst thing in the world, but he was still an influential player, up top for them. Whenever Peter Crouch couldn't do it, normally Walters would show up with a goal. But I think the big loss for them has to be Marko Arnautovic. He was that one, like Jermaine Defoe for Sunderland. He was their Defoe. He was the one that would get that goal that would just either tie the game or get them a late winner. He always seemed to pop up with a goal for them. Now that they've lost him, I don't know where the goals are going to come from. I looked at some of their players that they brought in. I didn't see anybody that I'm like, oh yeah, goal scorer. I didn't see anybody that I'm like, I know who they are. They did get Zuma on loan, so maybe he'll help them defensively, but I just see them really struggling without an Arnautovic. I haven't seen a very solid team from them overall. He's just been the one player that's sort of making it happen for them. And because honestly, I mean, looking at last season, they were 13th. So, it seems like, 13th, they were comfortable. But the truth is, you look at the gap between 13th and 18th, and it was, hang on, I got it right here. Yeah, they had 44, 18th had 34. So honestly, they were 10 points and Watford had 40. So they were 4 points behind 17th place, 4 places below them. And honestly, that gap right there, the 6-point gap that opened between 17th and 18th, didn't even happen till like the last 4 weeks. It was fairly close for a large part of the season, and Stoke were right in there. They were struggling with everybody else. I think losing Arnautovic really hurts them, and I don't think any of their buys are really going to help them. So I think this is the year that they go down. But all in all, that's about it for my full prediction table. If you want to get a closer look at that, I don't know if my camera's going to focus on it. It's kind of blurry. I got to get a new camera that can actually focus on things. But yeah, that's all for my predictions. Let me know what you guys think. Like I said, it's very hard to predict it right now. Anybody who actually thinks that their predictions are correct at this point, kind of a moron. So this is just all for fun, just to talk about, how do you think these teams are going to do? How do you think your team's going to do? All for that stuff. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. We can talk about it and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Chelsea reviews. I'll see you guys in the next game. Peace out.